If you're applying for disability benefits or help people that are, the path to success has never been more complicated. Welcome to the Disability Expert Podcast, where we tackle the difficult issues and interview the country's top experts to help you better navigate the disability process. Winning a disability case is hard and keeps getting tougher every day. We can't promise you'll win your case by listening, but we sure think it's going to help.
This really isn't that complicated. I mean, you want to win your case, don't you? Well, then listen to what I say.
Hey, welcome to the Disability Expert Podcast. I'm Chad Brown. I'm your host. And once again, today we have one of the top disability expert lawyers in the country on the show, Mr. Marc Whitehead, a longtime friend of mine. Marc, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. How's it been?
It's been going well. It's been going well. So let me tell my guests a little bit about you so they understand why you're here. I personally think Marc's probably the best disability firm in the state of Texas, one of the best in the country. They have a true national disability benefits firm. His firm does Social Security disability, VA disability, long-term disability, a bunch of disability-related practice areas as well, mass tort, elder care, life insurance denials. Marc himself is a national board trial advocacy expert in disability law, and I believe in trial law as well. Been in the disability space more than 30 years. We've been friends a long time. In fact, our firm doesn't do VA disability work. Marc's firm does most of our firm's VA disability cases when people find us for that issue. So we've worked together for years, and just excited to have him on the show. Marc, tell us a little bit about how'd you get into disability law to start with?
Well, it's sort of an interesting world. In a former lifetime, I was a personal injury trial lawyer, tried a lot of car wreck cases. And the way I introduce it, I am a recovering personal injury trial lawyer. And really, the fun, weird story behind it is there was a lawyer who had lost his license, had been disbarred because he had some alcohol issues. But he was a nice guy. He would come around to all the personal injury lawyers and say, send me your Social Security disability cases and I can handle those for you. And he would cut us in on the fee. And a lot of people don't realize this, but you do not have to be a licensed attorney to represent somebody on a Social Security disability claim. So that was his shtick. And so for a moment, we did that. And then the more I started looking at these claims, the more I said, I'd like to do this. And so I just started doing them. And initially, it was just a very, very small part of my practice. But the more I did it, the more I realized I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, you would go to a hearing for, this 60-year-old lady who was about to lose her home, and you would win the hearing, and we would come out of the hearing, and she would be crying and hugging you, and she would bring you cookies. I just really realized it was really, really rewarding. It was a rewarding area of practice. And it just kept growing over the years until the point that I was really tired of going to trial all the time on personal injury cases. And I just said, I think I can make a living full time representing disabled people. And that's what I did about 15 years into my practice. So I would say, over the last, 18 years, we've transitioned over to that's all we do. The three areas of disability work that you primarily mentioned there earlier. But that's how it all got started. It got started by getting that hug from the client. And I really, really liked getting the hug, and I really, really, really liked getting the cookies. And it just kind of took off from there.
Yes. I mean, I think I certainly can relate to that. I mean, I don't think people appreciate when you're actually engaging people that are really suffering. I mean, not that people in car accident cases aren't suffering, but when they've got their whole future, they need insurance, they need money to live, they're losing everything. Right. You can step in and be able to get that result for them.
I mean, I literally know that we have saved people's lives. I mean, we have, one of the things with Social Security disability is we get them their disability. We also get them on Medicare.
Right.
And the ability to have access to the medical system, to have access to your prescriptions that, up until then, that person did not have. We really, literally, I know we have saved people's lives. That really is rewarding.
So it's rewarding, but it's also frustrating. It's a frustrating system. It's a frustrating process. I mean, and then in the LTD space where you're fighting with insurance companies, and what keeps you in the space? So, because I understand how you get there. I got there much the same way, but what sort of keeps you there? What's driven you to go from, doing this as a side practice to being, one of the bigger national disability firms in the country.
Well, I would say a couple of things. I mean, the first one we've already discussed. I really like the area of practice. The other thing is that I have developed a cadre of young lawyers who have kind of come in behind me, and are now taking up the mantle of the cause that, I've been fighting here over the last couple of decades. And on top of really enjoying representing people that are disabled, I really enjoy mentoring my young lawyers, and helping them develop themselves professionally. And so, it's no longer just me. Marc Whitehead and Associates used to mean Marc Whitehead and his paralegal. Now Marc Whitehead and Associates means me and 6 other lawyers, and lots of staff, lots of paralegals, lots of legal assistants, and so forth, all working for the common goal of making our clients' lives better. That's our slogan. We talk about this in every meeting. We started with our purpose, and our purpose is to improve the lives of our disabled clients. And it's a very simple purpose. It's not complicated. It's not complex, but it's our guiding light. And I tell everybody every day, we're the good guys. We're helping real people with real problems. And always remember, that's our job, is to help people.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I have a couple associates, and Aaron Dalton, who came to work for me during COVID, couldn't really find any jobs. He really wanted to be he was a Chancellor Scholar at UNC, top-notch academic, and he wanted to go work in government work, and there wasn't any jobs, and so he came to work for us and was like, oh man, we really are getting to engage people and do this sort of, really impacting people's lives. So I think that's cool. And I know worked with your associates some over the years, and, obviously I'll do a really good job. I think your firm is unique though. We do some disability in LTD. There's other firms who do some disability in VA. There's some who, sort of specialize in LTD, but your firm really hits all of the major disability practice areas at scale. So you represent a lot of people, a lot of experience. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding when people just lay people on the street and people who come into these systems about how these systems interact and how they overlap. And, a lot of people on the street, well, disability is disability. And they have some incorrect idea about what disability is to start with. It doesn't even fit any of the actual patterns. But, I think you're in a unique position to talk about sort of like Social Security and disability and long-term disability, for example. Like, what are some of the ways that because a lot of people have to do both. If they get on LTD, they have to apply for Social Security disability, or they have Social Security disability and they happen to have an employer-based, program, for example, policy, for example. How do you think those interact? Like, what are some misunderstandings people have, and how do those really interact? Like for someone who's dealing with both of them.
All right. Well, the very basic. Just I don't want to assume many of your listeners know a lot about this. So the basics are simply this. If you are working for any company that has any sort of employee benefits plan, and you know that because you have a 401k and you have health insurance and you may have life and dental and all these other fun things. Within that plan that your employer has put together is a disability insurance policy. And the major carriers out there are like Unum, Hartford, Cigna, Aetna, Prudential, just to name a few. There's probably half a dozen more major ones out there. So you have this disability insurance policy if you're employed and have the benefit of an employee benefits plan. And your HR person will, if you go out on disability, in other words, you can't work because of an injury or because of a disease, is going to tell you to go file for your disability through your disability insurance carrier, which you may or may not have even remembered that you had, because most people don't remember that they have it until they need it. Well, one of the first things that if you read that policy, it will tell you that if you're out long-term disability more than a certain number of months, it could be 6 months, it could be 12 months, it could be a little longer. The terms of the policy require that you also file for Social Security disability. And of course, Social Security disability, people earn that insured status by virtue of paying their Social Security, their FICA taxes that are withdrawn from their paycheck. Every time you get a paycheck, you see the withdrawals for FICA, Social Security, and so forth. That's what gets you coverage under the Social Security disability system. So what happens is these people have coverage under both disability systems, and the private insurance, the Unum, the Hartford, the Cignas of the world, are going to require that you file for the government benefit as well. Not for your benefit, but for their benefit. And that's the key part of this, is that I'm just going to use some raw numbers. Let's say your Unum is paying you $4,000 a month and Social Security Disability comes in and pays you $2,000 a month. You don't get the total. You don't get $6,000 a month. You don't get to add them up. Unum is going to get to take an offset. In other words, they get to subtract what Social Security pays you. So you only get $4,000. So you don't get the benefit of that Social Security Disability check. Unum gets the benefit of that check. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other benefits. Obviously, you can qualify for Medicare if Social Security grants your benefits, and Social Security is going to be probably more permanent than the insurance side, although it just depends. There's a lot of moving variables to that. But that's kind of how they interplay with each other. And here's the trap that insurance companies won't tell you. They will give you the name of one of these disability advocates. And you always know the buzzword. When they say they're a disability advocate, that means they're not attorneys. And they will refer you over to these company. And what the company will say is, well, we will do this for you for free. Well, that's not really what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that everything you get from Social Security is going to go back to the insurance carrier. And they are going to report back to the insurance carrier everything they learn about your case, because since they're not attorneys, there is no attorney-client privilege that attaches. So you will sign a form and you won't realize what you're signing, but you will acknowledge that everything that they learn about you and your case is going to be turned over to the insurance company. That is not good for you. No lawyer would ever do that. That would be an absolute conflict of interest. That would absolutely get the lawyer disbarred, because the lawyer owes his duty to his client, not to the insurance company. But since they are non-lawyers, they are not under that obligation. So this is one of the traps that I see. I've written a book on the subject, and I have a whole chapter dedicated to this topic, which is why I'm preaching at this point. Do not hire the disability advocate that your insurance company suggests. Hire your own attorney, because your own attorney looks after you and nobody but you. So I will get off my soapbox a little bit, but you started asking about the
no, sure.
Too, and that really just rung a bell with me. So here's the thing that people kind of frequently get surprised by. After the Social Security Disability kicks in, frequently I will see the insurance company say that you no longer meet the disability standard and we're kicking you off. Right. You get your Social Security, but we're not paying any more money. And people can't believe it. They wait a minute, Social Security Disability granted me disability. They said I was disabled. How can this insurance company not say I'm not disabled? And they're just totally incredulous when this happens to them, and they don't understand how this could possibly happen. So this is how we end up representing claimants on the disability insurance side. And of course, what the insurance company will say is, well, wait a minute, our insurance policy has a different disability standard than what the government said. Right. To some extent, yes, a good lawyer can make that argument, but I would argue on the other side that that's a totally irrational argument. But, that's part of the legal system. Their lawyers are going to take their side, and your lawyer, you, me, whoever they hire, is going to have to argue your side that the standard is equivalent and therefore they should continue to pay.
It's interesting. One of the things, just got through shooting an episode recently. I was actually talking to a vocational expert, and she was talking about her observations about claimants at disability hearings. And one of the things she said was, it just never ceases to amaze me. People think they can do this on their own, and they show up, but they don't understand the rules, and they don't understand the nuance. And, and so you get people in the LTD space as well. Not only should you not do it on your own, you should use someone who's only, seeking your interest. And so I think there's a lot there. I want to talk about a few other things, because your firm does some other things that are really sort of reach into the disability client world. Before we do that, I got a quick word from our sponsor, CBIG.
Hey there, this is Kevin Rosenquist from the Disability Expert Podcast. Every week, Chad and his guests discuss the disability process and how expert attorneys help their clients obtain the Social Security disability benefits they deserve. But obtaining disability benefits is only half the battle. After winning your disability case, understanding Medicare should be your top priority, and that's where CBIG comes in. Disabled individuals must get their Medicare coverage right. Trying to understand Medicare can cause anxiety, uncertainty, and even fear. CBIG works with Medicare beneficiaries on disability around the country and is committed to helping those on disability navigate the complex Medicare process. Visit cbigcares.com today to see how CBIG makes Medicare simplified. Mention this ad and receive a free gift when you schedule a 10-minute consultation.
Okay, we are back from our sponsor break, and I'm talking with Marc Whitehead, who started, founded, and runs one of the best disability law firms in the country. We spent some time talking about LTD and how Social Security disability interacts, and I know you guys do some VA, and honestly, the LTD, the VA, and the Social Security systems have been sort of separated over the years. I don't want to spend a lot of time with that, but I am interested in something else your firm does, which people may not necessarily understand relates to disability, but I think you and I both would agree has a lot of relationship to disability, and that's mass tort. So your firm does mass tort work. I think, golly, I can't remember. It seems like we were at a seminar together years ago talking about mass tort. Can you talk a little bit about what mass tort actually is, what your firm does in that space, and how those cases sort of pop up inside disability, or how those cases produce disability cases?
So first thing, I need to clarify the difference between a mass tort and a class action, because a lot of people get confused with that. A class action is a situation where you have a lot of people with the exact same injury or wrong that occurred to them. For example, your cell phone company has overbilled 100,000 people by $5. Okay.
Right.
So you now have I have to do the math, of $5 million in damages, but nobody's going to sue over $5. So a class action is when you combine a lot of people with low damages, but the same type of case. That's different. A mass tort, and tort means injury. So for those who are not familiar with the legal terminology, anytime somebody commits a tort against you, in other words, they do a wrong to you, for the most part physically. I guess there's some exceptions to that, but they do a physical wrong to you. Okay, so example. Let's see one I'm working on right now. CPAP. A lot of people are familiar with CPAP machines. These are the breathing machines that people use when they have sleep apnea. And a lot of people in our world, in the disability world, are on CPAP machines. Well, there happened to be one particular model of a CPAP machine that the company negligently thought, bad design, whatever the cause was, the filter that they used was a cancer-causing agent. And so all of these people on this CPAP machine were breathing through a cancer-causing agent filter, and they were getting all these particles down into the respiratory system, causing all sorts of respiratory issues. That was an example of a mass tort that I was involved with. And the difference is, so all of these people had the same machine. They had the same wrong was done to them. The cancer-causing agent was introduced to the respiratory system. But they all had different damages. One person may have had, something minor. Another person may have developed cancer. Another person may have developed cancer so bad that they died from it. So the damages were different. So what happens is, in a mass tort, these cases get aggregated on the liability side, and then in theory, then each person gets a separate trial on the damages side. In other words, how bad were your damages?
Sure.
The reality is most of those cases will end up settling without the need for individual trials. And that's what happened in the CPAP case. How we get involved as a disability firm is that, we have a database now after doing this for 33 years or so. We have a database of about 20,000 clients, and we know all their medical history because we've been representing them on their disability claim. So I know every drug they ever took. I know every medical device they ever used. And so we were able to go back and look at our database and see that a number, I want to say was about 200 or 300 of our clients had used this exact device.
Oh, wow.
And of course, since they're already our clients, we can simply call them up and say, hey, do you still use this type of device? And we check the serial number and verify it's the brand that is the offending device. And, then we basically represent these people. In our case, it was about 200 to 300 that we were able to figure out from our database that had used this defective device. And so we represented them within that mass tort, within that mass litigation,
right,
in that claim against that manufacturer of that CPAP machine. That case is in the middle of a settlement process, which is a long drawn out thing. So the case, I think, settled for, I've lost track of the number, but it was well into the billions of dollars. But of course, that money has to be divided out over tens of thousands of people who were affected. But that would be an example of why we as a disability law firm have been involved in mass torts, because Same thing happened with the Camp Lejeune litigation.
Right.
All the Marines and the sailors at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, were exposed to basic different toxins in the water over decades, really.
Yeah.
Well, we have a whole database full of veterans that we have represented that were all stationed at Camp Lejeune. And therefore, we could go back into our database and see who we had previously represented or maybe still representing.
Yeah, sure.
That could have been exposed, and we did the same thing. And that litigation is currently pending. That one's still ongoing. But that's our connection with the mass tort world, is the fact that since we have represented so many people and we know everything they've done. We know every drug they took. We know every medical device. We know every toxin they were ever exposed to, because we've been representing them on their medical issues for years.
Yeah, for sure. You think that the average person on disability, probably a lot of times, they have no idea that these mass torts even exist. Like,
no,
yeah,
almost none of our clients had any idea that the CPAP machine, had carcinogens in it.
Yeah.
We had to educate them on the fact, hey, our records show you use this particular model. Can we verify this real quick? Go look real quick. And if we can verify it, that really was what they used, and they're like, all right, now we know, number one, get off of it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Get off of it. Go get a different model. That would be number one. And number two, let's join forces together.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think, my experience over the years, not only a lot of disability lawyers fail to understand sort of this interplay. I have a horrible case in my mind where a guy missed a hip replacement, the disability lawyer, and they got to us after a statute of limitations. And I always think back of that case and go, wow, if you'd just been aware of the issues, you really could have changed your life. So that's, it's really, it's really admirable that you're doing that and really engaging in that space. One last thing, we're almost out of time, but I know you guys also just expanded into doing some elder care work. Can you briefly just sort of tell us what drove that? Like, what led you to sort of say, hey, we're going to go in and we're going to expand and try to meet an additional need that our clients have?
So here's the first part that I kind of have to explain. So Medicare and Medicaid are two different programs, and they cover different things, and people frequently get those two confused. And what happens in the life cycle of our clients? We're representing clients usually in their 40s, 50s, maybe early 60s on their disability claim. And so we're representing a population of people that are not physically well, frequently have chronic diseases, and typically chronic diseases don't get better as you get older, they get worse.
For sure.
And so when our clients start to enter the next phase of their life, the next chapter of their life, their 60s, 70s, 80s, frequently they need assisted living care or they need nursing home care because of these chronic diseases that were disabling in the first place. The problem is when we get them on disability, Social Security disability benefits, we get them Medicare, but they frequently don't have Medicaid. And here's why that matters. Medicare, and this shocks people don't realize this, but Medicare, what people normally get on disability or at their retirement age, does not cover assisted living or nursing home care. Not on the long-term basis. It will for short-term, but long-term care, and long-term means over 100 days, it does not cover it. And so that means people have to pay for nursing home care out of pocket. Well, that will bankrupt somebody really quickly. If you think of the scenario of a couple that has saved all their lives, and they're now in their 60s, 70s, and they're on a fixed income, but they have a nice little nest egg that they've built up. If the man, say for example, the man has to go into a nursing home, nursing homes cost, $12,000, $14,000 a month.
Sure.
His nursing home care will quickly bankrupt his family, his wife. So the healthy wife is going to be bankrupt because of what had to happen to take care of her husband who had to go into a nursing home, which is a very, very sad situation. So what you want to do in this situation, this is what elder care lawyers do, is we try to get our clients on Medicaid, and Medicaid will pay for that nursing home care. Therefore, we can save the family, we can save that healthy spouse from bankruptcy, because that's what's going to happen. You got a couple $100,000 stuck away for retirement, you will wipe that out within a year or two of nursing home care. And then the poor wife is just left destitute. So the way you get people on Medicaid can be complicated. It can require a lot of financial maneuvers. It can require the establishment of trust. It can require the establishment of annuities. There's a lot of different, I would say there's about 20 different tools in an elder lawyer's toolkit that can make that person qualify under the indigency rules for Medicaid? Because normally under Medicaid, you have to be indigent to get Medicaid.
Right.
However, there are lots of ways that we can shelter income, shelter assets, transfer assets legally,
Right.
Use through trust mechanisms, through a lot of different mechanisms that are too complicated to go in here.
Yeah, sure.
But we can help people. So we can help people get on Medicaid in order to get the nursing home and assisted living care that they need in that next phase of life. And we can do it and save the family, save the healthy spouse from becoming bankrupt because of it. So
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
what we do. And it's just sort of the next chapter in our clients' lives.
sure.
So we figured we might as well extend our practice out so we could continue to represent people basically for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what really just great about that is a lot of disability lawyers sort of, I mean, we do this because I own an insurance agency. They stop at the end of the representation. They don't even help them make sure their back pay's right, where you guys are stepping in saying, we recognize that the benefit we're getting them is going to be sustaining them in for a very long time. But the disabilities that brought them to us also pose additional issues down the road, which just really identifying issues people don't even know about. And I think that's great. We are out of time. Great seeing you. Great catching up. As always, just learn a lot when I talk with you and just see, so glad your firm's doing well. And people want to reach out to you. They have a claim. They have a disability, VA, LTD, elder care issue with planning in Texas. I know you guys are sort of limited in Texas there, but they have those issues. How can they get in touch with you? How can they find you? How can they get your help?
So our website is disabilitydenials.com. So I would go to our website, disabilitydenials.com. with an S, although I do think we bought the URL for disabilitydenial.com. It came available and people were getting confused, but I still remember put the S on it just to be sure.
Right.
Or you can email me directly, mark@markwhitehead.com. Now, Mark is spelled with a C.
Right.
I always make fun of my mother. My mother's birthday was yesterday, and I happened to mention that she screwed up the spelling of my name. But I found out later that Mark with a C is actually French. I didn't know this. I just thought she couldn't spell.
Oh, very
Mark
good.
at markwhitehead.com. So, and we handle disability all over the country. Now, the elder care we can only do in the state of Texas because that is state specific.
Sure.
But
we'll drop all that.
Law is federal, and we handle all forms of disability all over the country.
Okay, very good. We'll make sure we drop all that contact information in the show notes. And with that, that's a wrap. That's another episode of the Disability Expert Podcast. Be with us next week when we bring on one of the nation's best disability lawyers. Thanks for joining. Subscribe.